Nifemi, over to you. The International Labour Organization has stated that the world may experience up to 25 million job losses around the globe, and this may further extend with regards to how long the pandemic will be with us. How would you see that would affect the Nigerian populace? I mean, the people in the job market and the job seekers. How do you see that affecting Nigeria as a nation?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Very clearly.
So, yes, great. Okay, so I just want to start by saying that, a lot of us that are living through these COVID-19 times have never experienced the pandemic, right? So a lot of us have not lived post-COVID. So a lot of things that will be said in terms of what is going to happen post-COVID is just based on our inference or based on precedents or what we expect to see in the labor market or in the marketplace. And I think that the dynamics are changing as the days go by, and you would see how a couple of days ago attention really shifted from COVID, and we started to wonder if COVID was really a reality because of all the other things that were happening in the world. So going back to COVID-19 specifically and how it will affect the world populace, like you said rightly, there's a lot of statistics flying around in terms of how this will affect the labor market and how this will affect job seekers and all of that. And it wasn't something that was planned for. So this was something everybody sort of came into 2020 enthusiastic. This goes from from employers to employees to people seeking for new opportunities, and we all wanted to start the decade on a good note. However, COVID-19 hit, and with everything in life, how do we move forward from it? And to just speak to how this is going to affect, or how this has started affecting the Nigeria population, I'll talk about the three key buckets that you sort of broke it down into quickly. So from an employer perspective, right, the biggest thing that we see is that, there's a reduce in revenue, there's a decline in revenue. So employers started the year, with high anticipation and high forecast, but because of the situation, this has dipped for a lot of organizations. Now, this varies from organization to organization and sector to sector. So for example, in the tech world, they are experiencing a different reality than what the aviation sector is experiencing, for example. So I would not generalize, but then, one of the things that has been seen a lot from organizations is that there's a decline in their revenue. For employees, and with that decline, speaking to the employers also, with that decline, then comes how do we want to stay afloat? How do we want to ensure that our expenses are as lean as possible? How do we want to still be able to make profit at the end of the year or not, and to ensure that the company doesn't go down, that kind of thing. And with that, the company would now start to look inward. So you're seeing a lot of introspection in terms of what do we do to cut costs, which then affects the other two groups of people that I'm going to talk about. So from an employee perspective, right, you start to see, based on what is happening with the employers, the employees are then affected, where the employers are saying, how do we cut costs? And when the conversations of how to cut costs start to happen, one key aspect of that conversation for employers is the employees, right? So what do we do today that we really don't have to do, right? Which roles do we have today that we don't need to have? And that goes across different spectrums. So of course, we are saving costs on diesel and all of those things that we would have to spend if people were coming to the office. But at the same time, we are paying salaries, and productivity is not 100%. So is there a way we can drive productivity to 100%, or do we need to start looking at what roles are not efficient anymore, that cannot be done from home? And like I said, in the employee situation or the employer situation, this also varies from organization to organization. So in some organizations and in some sectors, business is as usual. So people can still work from home. People can still earn their pay. People can still, if not 100% productivity, still be at a very optimal productivity. For some sectors, that's not possible. Like if they are not on site, they literally can't work. And working from home, I believe we'll still speak to, going into this conversation, is a bit alien to the average Nigerian organization. So there's not a lot of trust, in that regard. So employees are also feeling a bit frustrated because, I mean, I'd rather be in the office, but I can't be in the office, but you don't trust me to be able to do my work, there's all of that, and it's just different things. And just to go straight to the point, one of the things that start to impact employees is that employers start considering options like unpaid leave, first leave, possibly redundancy, termination, different things. And there's that uncertainty that's looming, even with people that have not been affected by this, different levels of changes. And then the third category of people that I'll speak to are job seekers, right? So these are people who, are looking to get into another job, have been job hunting pre-COVID, or wanted a change in their career, wanted a new job. And this is impacting people because, like I said, with the employers, they are thinking, how do we want to cut costs? So it's like, even if we plan to recruit 20 people this year, are these roles really essential? Do we still need to have these people? Are there people that we currently have who are not doing anything that we can potentially deploy to these roles that we initially wanted to hire people for? So because of that, the opportunity in the labor space has kind of dipped as well, because there are not a lot of openings out there. And you start to see that even employers that have started having conversations with people, started interviews, start to say, okay, we're sorry, we need to put a hold on this. We can't proceed with an offer yet. That's not to say people are not getting offers in this time. I know people who are still getting offers in this time. But then, the volume that would have happened in 2020 has declined. So those are the ways that I would, just speak to in a bit on how it has affected these three, major categories of people from a work perspective.
Thank you, Nifemi. Thank you so much for your explanation. Now the next question would go to Vincent. Vincent, hello, are you there?
Yes, Tommy, I'm here.
Yes. So the CBN and the Bankers Committee has just issued a directive asking all banks in Nigeria to seek its approval first before laying off staffs. That is a little bit tricky, judging by the fact that we have the Labor Act, and the Labor Act stipulates, I'm not so sure, Section 20 of the Labor Act stipulates the mode of terminating employment based on redundancy. I want you to explain that. What is the legality of the CBN's directive by juxtaposing it to the provisions of the Labor Act and the individual contracts of employment?
Thank you, Tomiwa. There's no doubt that what the CBN has tried to do essentially is a balancing act. So the foundation of any contract, of any employment, is usually based in contract. And we have two broad types of contracts. You have contracts with statutory flavor and contracts which essentially are seen as master and servant. And depending on the type of contract you're talking about, it will usually contain the way that kind of contract can be terminated. So a contract is usually between the employer and the employee, which stipulates the terms and conditions upon which, the employment contract will be carried out. Now, from my experience, the kind of contracts that banks would have with their employees essentially will be master-servant kind of contracts. And those contracts would also incorporate other things like the handbook and other agreements, which may not be expressly stated in the employment contract, but stated expressly in the handbook and other documents which have been made part of the employee contract itself. Now, with that said, under Nigerian law, under that type of situation, hello, are you still there? Okay, under that type of situation, what the law says is that an employee can terminate his contract for good reason, bad reason, or no reason at all. So in other words, in Nigeria as at today, all I need to do is, as long as I give the adequate notice, I do not need to explain the basis upon which I am terminating. However, where I am explaining where the basis upon which I am terminating, what the law says is that the onus is on the employer, who gives a reason, to prove the basis of its reason. From experience, our advice usually to employers is do not give a reason. Now, with respect to the banking situation, there is no doubt that the banks have a right within the terms of the contract to terminate contracts in line with the specifications or the terms and conditions of those particular contracts. However, do not forget that these banks do not act in isolation. They are regulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the supervising authority for banks. And the responsibility of the CBN is to ensure that there is still trust in the system. The entire financial system is built on trust, that you can put your money with a bank, and at the time you go there, your money will be there. Now, COVID-19 has presented new challenges, and a video had leaked where a certain MD of a bank had said that upon review, they may have to begin to lay off people in a systematic manner, beginning with their outsourced staff. And what had happened was that the confidence in the financial sector and the banking sector began to erode. And what the CBN essentially did was to restore confidence in the system by saying, look, hold off banks until we can get a hold of this situation. Nobody should be laid off. So the mindset to the average man is that, okay, at least the banks are not failing. Because if you see that the banks are sacking people, the mindset is that this bank may fail, and you see a run of the banks where people are saying, look, you know what, I want to close my accounts and get my money. So to answer the question pointedly, the banks have a legal right to terminate the contract in line with the terms of the contract. However, the CBN has tried to do a balancing act to ensure that there is confidence in the system.
Thank you, Vincent. Now to Val. Now, Val, judging all that has happened, most employees to the post and they want to know what certain skills they need to acquire for them to become indispensable in the workplace. So I will be asking you, Val, what special skills do employees need to learn to enhance their productivity and survive in the labor market post-pandemic era?
Thank you for your question. I greet you once all who's available online now. The pandemic has become a major challenge, and it's something that was so uncertain. Nobody expected this to happen. And like what the HR lady said, Nifemi said, she made mention that most employers expected the best and they are not getting it at this point in time, and employers are expecting more from them and they are not seeing what they are expecting from them too. So at this point in time, what sells an employer or an applicant at this point in time is the soft skills. Because we already know that the hard skills have been what we have been running on. But at this point in time, what can be able to give you an edge over competitors, that's your other applicants who are applying or vying for a possible job, is your soft skills. So what are these soft skills? Soft skills are a combination of people skills, social skills, communicational skills, character, personality that can be able to drive you for looking for a specific job. If you cannot be able to develop your soft skills, I don't think this era is for you. The major challenge we are having at this point in time, like you can see most job adage now, most people want to have people who can be able to do things with lesser supervision, with self-development, who can ride on 1 or 2 position for just one available space. So without that, you cannot be able to run. And most employees don't really have this. And it's a problem which we have been passing through in this country. We discovered that majority of the employees we are having are half-baked, except those who have gone on their own to enhance themselves. If not for so, it is a big challenge which we are still running on. But for this pandemic issue now, despite most companies now, apart from the online, the IT, who are really doing well, or the logistics, most companies are now working from their homes. And like she said, she further mentioned, that's Nifemi, she made us understand that most of these organizations are not really showing the worthiness of their staff being working from homes, and it's a big challenge. So if you are working from homes, how can I be able to know you are doing the needful? How can I be able to have the index or to show that your KPI is right? That means there's something that you are not getting right or something that is wrong. So the soft skills can be the only age that can give us what we are seeking at this point in time. How do we develop this? How can we be able to know this? First of all, soft skills are inbuilt. It's an interpersonal skill which you can be able to use to sell yourself. Most applicants don't have this. So for you can be able to be sellable, or you want to advertise yourself to the new trend, you need to develop the soft skills. So what are those soft skills? The interpersonal skills, your character, the ability to be creative in your job or your workplace it's a key thing we need to look at. Most applicants are not creative. They are always waiting for them to be supervised or to be told what to do and to carry out their job functions. These are things we are not looking at. We want people who can be creative, people who can add value to the organizations. Those are the selling points now. And most of these things are not things you see by your resume, things that have been put on black and white. It's things you see that are built softly inside of you, in the act of you showing your attitude, in the act of having this interview with you, asking you questions. That's innate passion towards the job would show. If you are not passionable or you don't have that passion towards what you want to do, no employer is ready to employ somebody who is not passionate towards the target. So that soft skills are very, 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 it's a niche which every one of us need to develop as an employee, because every employee now, for them to spend a 1 naira, they need to think twice. Despite the fact that at this looming period, the recession is at the corner, paying of salaries is a big, huge issue to most employers at this point. As big as so many banks that they are slashing salaries. Some other organizations are not slashing. They are looking for excuses not to pay other benefits and entitlements. So the only thing an organization can feel, and they feel they can be able to do for an employee, is to show or sell yourself. That passion, that innovative or creative attitude, you need to bring it out to the limelight for organizations or employers to be able to see you have what it takes to run in this dispensation.
Thank you, Val. Really appreciate it. Now, over to Nifemi.
Okay.
Now, on issue of redundancy, retrenchment, salary cut, or non-payment of salary at all. How do you think employees, because people are bothered, how do you think they can insulate themselves from the harsh economic situation, either from the work perspective or from taking care of the home perspective, as the case may be? How can employers to manage the situation? Because it is what you produce that determines the strength of your workforce. How can employees insulate themselves from redundancy, salary splash? Is there any way out? And how can employers manage the situation in such a way that it would not affect them? So over to you, Nifemi.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very interesting question, and this is one of the questions that get asked a lot this time. So I'll start with from the employer's perspective, right? And when I speak to people, people who hire people, I like to say the truth is that it should not be the first thing as an employer that you're thinking about how do you want to let people off? How do you want to lay people off? That should not be the first thing to think about. I think that, a lot of things are being done in Nigeria that are not sort of international best practices.
Okay, I would proceed to VI as a connection. Vincent, are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you, Tommy.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question
Sure.
in the light of what Nifemi has just answered. I would like you to expatiate further, especially from the legal point of view. Is there any recourse to employees who have been laid off, particularly with their employers citing the pandemic as the reason for the layoff? Is there any recourse? That pandemic in particular.
Okay, so to answer the question, when I started the presentation earlier, I said the foundation of any employment will be an employment contract that will provide for terms and conditions. Now, in Nigeria today, the law is that your employer as long as the employment is not one of statutory flavor, does not have to give you a reason why they are terminating your contract. In other words, your employer just has to comply with the notice required. And once there's a compliance of that, your termination letter can simply say that your services are no longer required. You are hereby given your 1 month's notice. So the idea is that your employment can be terminated without any reasons. Now, when an employer decides to cite the pandemic as a basis upon which he will be terminating, the onus is on him, if there's any litigation or recourse, to prove the effects of the pandemic. Now, from the available facts of what has happened is that, yes, so I said once an employer cites the issue of the pandemic as the basis upon which he's terminating, then the onus is on him to prove how the pandemic has, made him or ensure that he terminates your agreement. Now, from the available facts of what we all have seen and experienced is that one, people in Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State, excuse me, were forced to stay at home for at least a period of about 6 weeks, where there was mandatory no movement and only essential services were allowed to move. Now, I know people who are, for example, in the tourism sector, who are travel agents, and during that period, there was 0 naira for that kind of business because they are dependent on people traveling and holidays being booked, and that wasn't possible. So what you had was that you had employers having discussions with their employees to say, do we, move? Do you still want to stay? If you want to stay, this is what I want to pay you, or if not, you are free to resign if you want to leave. So employers in this region, that's Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun, can decide that, look, because of circumstances beyond their control, because of events that they could not control, they had no choice than to terminate. In law, we call that frustration, that events outside the normal course of business have frustrated the acts that they can no longer continue with that employment arrangement, because for no fault of theirs, the government has said, stay in your house. For no fault of theirs, there is a virus out there that would endanger the lives of staff. And for no fault of theirs, no income can come in. And based on that, we're sorry, we cannot continue with the relationship. However, the rider is that any termination must be done, 1, in line with the terms of the agreement, or 2, with a concurrence between employer and employee.
Okay, I would proceed with Val. Val, this question is for you. We are looking at the future of work after the pandemic. Of course, there's going to be work after pandemic. What do you see as HR consultants? What do you see? What is the future of work after the pandemic? Is it still going to remain the same as we had pre-pandemic, or there will be some logical restructuring in how work is done after the pandemic? Wow.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate. The future after the pandemic is going to be it's too tenuous to verbalize, because at this point in time, it has already started. Change is the constant thing in nature. So as far as change, what I expect every employee to do at this point in time is that they should start planning to change by acquiring new skills, developing themselves, getting new certifications, and thinking of getting better programs. Or if possible, you can also switch some to new discipline, because now new discipline or new job roles are being created in this course of this pandemic now. For example, let me use that of Twitter now. Twitter just made everybody understand that henceforth, all their staff don't come to office anymore. They are all working from home. I think that this idea came during this course of this pandemic. So there's a new job role, new job function, new locations for everybody to work at. But presently in Nigeria, I think it has changed. Let me start with like a client I'm having presently now. The primitive marketing is about to go into extinct, like the normal going door to door sharing of flyers. I don't think, because this pandemic issue is going to take a while, it's still going to be living with us for now. So I don't think most of those marketing processes is going to still be working. So now, if you are employing somebody that can be employable in the marketing field, is somebody who has a more experience in the digital or social media marketing with little of primitive market, that's the traditional marketing. So such kind of person can be able to go. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that the usual way of working has changed due to the cause of this pandemic that has caused a big issues to the global world at large. So people supposed to be thinking of how to develop themselves, build themselves with, like what I said earlier, the soft skills is what is sellable and attractive in the labor force for now.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, I would like to ask you, how would you see working remotely after the pandemic? Is it going to be one of the bases of employability? Are employers going to ask if employees are able to work from home after the pandemic? I need you to just give us a little bit of explanation.
Okay, yes. Working from home to some sectors is going to be the future. Like the IT, there are some sectors is going to be working from, that's going to be their trend, henceforth. But the usual other sectors like the banking, the financial institution, the law, and I don't think working from home can be a normal thing. There might still be, it can be in a swift work form, but the most important thing is this: monitoring working from home is what employers are looking at this point in time. Having a good performance appraisers that can be able to hold on. How can you be able to hold their activities working at home? So mostly now, most organizations are looking at it like there's a daily task or daily target or the daily job description which you must meet up, and you have to submit to your line manager or your supervisor. So at this point in time, working from home is going to trend, but going to work, monitoring your staff, giving them the right source to their job description is key. Because let me use a company we are having a challenge with now. He said the staff should be working from home, but he now discovered the majority of them don't even work from home. When they go on the normal webinar, some of them pretend as if they are working. Submitting their report is a problem, and the boss once in a while try to follow up on what they are doing. He discovered that these guys are not doing anything. I don't know if this is a cultural hazard in Nigeria, but I don't know. Over the developed culture, I know they do things in their own phase and it works for them. But in Nigeria, working from home is going to be challengeful. But some persons are already getting it right, but I don't know. Like for us, most of us in the office, some come today, others work the next day, work from home. We discover that those who work from home, they are not attaining what we expect them to do on a daily basis. So it's challengeful. So each employers every day are coming up with new models, new structures of how to see how to curb these excesses in making sure that the productivity of their job must be achieved.
Thank you so much for your contribution.
Sorry, Tommy, maybe I just want to quickly add to that. So just taking off from where Val stopped, we must understand that what the COVID-19 did was to force people into the future quicker than we expected. So we would have gotten to this part maybe 10 years from now, but 10 years has come to us. But the infrastructure, especially in Nigeria, is not available. So for example, if you have a staff who doesn't have a generator or a solar system, no matter how he wants to be efficient, his laptop at some point in time may die. If you're in an area where the internet infrastructure is not as good as you would want, you will find out that that kind of staff may not be as efficient as you want. So while employers are looking for different ways to work remotely, we cannot work outside the ecosystem of Nigeria itself. So if the basic infrastructure that should be there, water, light, internet service, things that are basic in developed countries, not for big men, quote unquote, it may be difficult to even achieve that kind of remote system that other civilized countries are already used to at this point in time.
Thank you so much for that. Hello, Nifemi.
The challenges, like, hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, I said this is one of the challenges, that we face. Vincent also spoke to it, a bit in that sense. Anyway, I hope you can hear me now.
Very clearly.
And I'll just sort of run earlier. So your question was around, how can employers and employees sort of insulate themselves from some of these drastic measures that can be done, from based on the COVID-19 situation. And I started to speak, from the employer's perspective. And what I was trying to say was that, first of all, for the employers, this is first of all, as individuals, we need to acknowledge that this is a tough time for everybody. Yeah. Same goes to the employers, right? So this is a tough time for the employers. That said, I know that there are employers out there who are using this as an excuse, right? So they are looking for the first sense of opportunity to be able to say, oh, let's cut costs, right? And that's not the right way to go. And what I was trying to say was that, because of the peculiar situation we find ourselves in Nigeria, from an unemployment/underemployment issue, a lot of organizations tend to take advantage of that, right? And then, at these times, you hear them doing a lot of things that are not according to international best practices. And I think that one of the things that leave employees vulnerable, which Vincent also spoke a bit to, is that we don't have a comprehensive labor law, right? So today, and I mean, Vincent is a lawyer, so you probably can speak to this a lot more. But today, the category of people that the Labor Act even covers does not include people like you and me, right? It includes a category of people that are called blue-collared workers, who are, your manual and clerical staff. Yeah. So you really are not covered by any law. That's the truth. Secondly, the only thing that is binding to your employer is your employment contract. So at the end of the day, when people ask these questions, how can I insulate myself? How can I, protect myself from all of these things? It goes back to your employment contract. So what is in your employment contract? That said, as employers should have a sense of moral standing to be able to say, okay, first of all, of course, being sort of approaching it from a moral perspective, and second of all, being transparent, right? So if you are transparent to your employees to say, this is where we found ourselves and we genuinely cannot continue to pay full salary, or we cannot afford for everybody not to be working. There are different ways through which employers can have those conversations. I feel like employees will also come from a place of understanding and would appreciate, the measures that the employers choose to put in place. So I don't think that sort of these drastic measures should be the first place that employers should go to. But then, also being open and transparent in their conversations, they can try to see, what can we do to reduce the impact that this could potentially have on the employees. And then to the employees, I mean, and Vincent really spoke a lot to this in the sense that there is not a lot you can do to insulate yourself, right? Employment is at will for both the employer